top you'll be ready. I'll bring up the pot.
Okay, you can bring it out.
It could be.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. I'd like to discuss today the topic, as the title suggests, the various halachos of the lfnim mshuras hadin. The lfnim mshuras hadin.
We specialize in that.
Yeah, we'll find out. Stay tuned for the next 45 minutes.
Already specialized.
Okay, we hope so. Okay, so we're going to discuss today the topic of the lfnim mshuras hadin, specifically to cases of monetary law. Meaning there are other halachas of lfnim mshuras hadin which we're not going to cover today in regards to areas of Kiddush Hashem, of a person giving up his life on Kiddush Hashem, and different severe halachas as those. That's not going to be our topic for today. We're specifically going to be localized on specific halachas within Choshen Mishpat, within monetary law. We're going to go through monetary law. We're going to go through various cases in the Gemara and use those as our building points to discuss the parameters of this halacha as best as we can in the time allotted. So here we go. The first Gemara on the first page in source number 1, I'll just paraphrase the case. The Gemara discusses that Rav Yehuda was walking behind his Rebbe Shmuel in the marketplace, and the marketplace is frequented by many, and he finds a wallet, or he says, potentially, if I would find a wallet here, what would be the halacha? And Shmuel tells him, you could keep it. So he says, but what would happen? Rav Yehuda continued to ask his Rebbe, what would happen if a Jewish person would come, a Yisrael would come and give me a siman, a marking sign that would show that it's his? Do I have to give it back? He said, yes, you have to give it back. So Rav Yehuda said to Shmuel, that's seemingly a contradiction. If I could keep the wallet, so why, if someone comes ahead and gives me a siman, would I have to now go ahead and give it back? So Shmuel responded, this is a halacha called lfnim mshuras hadin. Literally going beyond the letter of the law. Although you could technically keep it, if you know that your fellow Jew lost the item, it is appropriate to go ahead and give it back. Now, I said the word appropriate, but if you really read the Gemara's expression, the Gemara, Shmuel said, you're chayiv, you're obligated to return it. So that's interesting in that the Gemara said chayiv, but we're calling lfnim mshuras hadin in the expression of chayiv. The Gemara, Shmuel proves it. The Gemara says from a case of Shmuel's father, where Shmuel's father found at one point a lot of barrels of wine, and they were lost for over 12 months. And even though there was an assumed yush that the owner had given up hope of ever finding, if you lose a case of wine, who thinks a year later ever going to find it? The owner gave up hope, and nonetheless, Shmuel's father returned the barrels of wine. So we see this concept of lfnim mshuras hadin. This is example number 1. Now I want to emphasize again, this case is the first case we're bringing as a source of the din of the lfnim mshuras hadin, this concept of going above and beyond the letter of the law. And the Gemara felt it was such a pashut concept, was such a simple idea, it did not need to bring any scriptural proof. There are no psukim to prove this idea. It's completely pure logic that even though I'm allowed to keep something, for example, I found it in the marketplace. So even though we say that the person who lost it for sure gave up hope, because there's an abundance of people there, nonetheless, lfnim mshuras hadin, logically, the Gemara says I should have to give it back if a Jewish person comes and gives me a siman. That's case number 1. Case number 2, further in the Gemara in Bamitzia, on Daf Lamed Amud Beis, the Gemara has a case in a different halacha. The first halacha was Hashavas Haveda. This halacha is a case that we had also in yesterday's parsha of prika or te'ina, helping a Jew or unload or load up his packages. And the Gemara recounts a story with Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi, who was of course a great Talmid Chacham, and he was traveling, and one time he sees a fellow Jew who needed help, who he had unloaded his wares and needed help to get his packages back on his back. And the person turned to Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi and said, excuse me, Kvod Harav, could you please help me load up? And Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi, assumingly he was wearing his rabbinic garb, it was beneath his dignity, so he turns to his fellow Jew and says, well, what's the value of the stuff, the merchandise that you have? So the Gemara says he told him it's worth half a zuz. I don't know how much it is in contemporary coinage, but let's just say it was worth $20. So Rishmael says, $20? No problem. Takes the 20 out of his pocket, gives him $20 and tells him, have a good day. Here, I bought the merchandise off you, you can leave it here, and this way I get away from helping you to load up, because I'm pater from helping you, but I feel bad for you. But since I feel bad for you, I'm going to go ahead and give you $20. This guy was a smarty pants. So he says, now that stuff, you bought it. So now Rabbi Shmuel says, it's hefker now. I don't need it. Oh, it's hefker. So he picks it back, takes it back up. Now he has $20, and he has his original merchandise. And he turns to Rabbi Shmuel the second time and says, "Well, my fellow rabbi, could you please help me load up my bag?" And he says, "Well, no, but here's another $20." And then he eventually, Rabbi Shmuel says, "No, you know what? For the whole world it's hefker, but for you it's not hefker. You cannot reclaim it. Anybody else can come and claim it." The Gemara gets into a decide discussion, which we're not going to focus on right now. Is that really a hefker or not? Anyway, but the Gemara continues and says, why did Rabbi Shmuel do that? He wasn't obligated. He was patur from helping the guy load up even the first time. So why did he feel that he should go ahead and put down a 20 and then another 20 and keep paying the guy for his wares if he was patur from the halacha? He was not obligated to help his fellow Jew. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi was acting lfnim mshuras hadin, the same concept of acting above the letter of the law. And then the Gemara says, and how do we know this concept exists? And the Gemara goes through a pasuk which was in Parshas Yisro, and okay, we'll just cut to the chase. What we need for our halacha is that the Gemara, the pasuk says, "Asher ya'asun." These are the commandments that we shall do, and the Gemara darshins that refers to the lfnim mshuras hadin. Not only should we do what it says directly in the Torah, but we should figure out what else we need to do and do that as well. Meaning, use a little bit of our own seichel, our own intellect, and go lfnim mshuras hadin. So again, in the second Gemara right over here, the Gemara felt the need to prove the halacha of lfnim mshuras hadin from a scriptural source. I had to bring psukim to prove that concept. In the first Gemara, the Gemara very clearly just brought lfnim mshuras hadin as a given. The conclusion of this Gemara and source number 2 is fascinating, where towards the bottom, in the wide lines, the Gemara says, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo charva Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim was not destroyed only because Elal Shadanu ba din Torah, because they acted in the laws of the Torah. And the Gemara says, what does that mean? Of course you have to act in the laws of the Torah. And the Gemara it concludes its remarks by explaining what that means is that the people only acted according to the letter of the law. They didn't go above and beyond. They didn't rise themselves to the next level and go ahead and help out another Jew even when they technically were not obligated. And that's the reason Rabbi Yochanan says that Yerushalayim was destroyed. That's the conclusion of this Gemara. So let's just recap what we had so far. Fascinating 2 Gemaras. Number 1, a case of Hashavas Haveda, where the Gemara said there's an idea, even where you're patur from returning an item, nonetheless it should be done in cases where you can do lfnim mshuras hadin, go beyond the letter of the law. And the Gemara said that was a simple svara, a logic. The second Gemara was a halacha of helping another Jew load up his merchandise, his wares, and even though a zaken ve'enu lefi kvodo, someone like Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, a great Talmid Chacham, was patur from doing that mitzvah, nonetheless he took the money. He actually not just gave of his time, he actually took a monetary loss because he paid for the items, the merchandise, and therefore, even though he was absolved from doing that, he went above the letter of the law and paid for it. The Gemara proved that from a pasuk, that such a concept exists. And the Gemara concludes that Rabbi Yochanan said this halacha, this concept of halacha is so severe that was a reason why Yerushalayim was destroyed. On the next page, in source number 3, we have another Gemara, also a case of monetary halacha, a case of a chosha mishpat, where in the olden days, before they had those little markers that you could run on your bills to see if they were counterfeit or not, in order to figure out if your coins were counterfeit or they were legitimate, you would go to a professional money changer, professional banker, I guess, and he would evaluate your coins and tell you if they're counterfeit or they're real. Okay, so the Gemara has a whole discussion about it. We're just going to focus in on the case that the Gemara understood. We don't know how the Gemara knew this already, but Reb Chia, the great Reb Chia, was, besides he was an expert in Talmudic law and halacha, he was also an expert in determining if the currency was legitimate or not. And one time a woman came to him, and she asked him, Reb Chia, could you please check out my coins? Reb Chia looked at the money, he said, it's good. The woman went to purchase her merchandise. Actually, she accepted it as a payment for merchandise, and then later she finds out that the money was counterfeit. It was not good coins. She comes back to Reb Chia with a claim. Come on, you got to pay up. What's going on? And the Gemara says that he went ahead and reimbursed her. Now, I just want to focus on one point of this Gemara. There's a lot of discussion to have here. Technically, Reb Chia was patur because he's an expert, and there's a logic over here in the Gemara. If you're an expert and you make a mistake, you're not responsible. Only if you're an amateur and you make a mistake are you responsible. That's a discussion into itself why that's the halacha, but let's just accept that for now. So even though Reb Chia was technically pater from repaying the woman for the loss of her money, nonetheless he did it, and the Gemara again says, why did Reb Chia do it? Because since Reb Chia was a great Talmid Chacham, he acted lfnim mshuras hadin, and the Gemara concludes by bringing the same scriptural source that we brought before in source number 2 from the pasuk in Yisro, and darshaning the pasuk of Asher Ya'asun, that we see this idea of lfnim mshuras hadin, a monetary law. So again, this is the third Gemara we brought, and this is the second Gemara which brought the same source from a pasuk in Parshas Yisro. The last Gemara we're going to bring in source number 4 is another incident regarding monetary law, where we have Rabba Bar Chanan, one of the great Amoraim, who once hired some porters to carry some barrels of wine for him. Whatever reason, they were negligent in what they did, and they dropped the wine, and everything got lost. So, of course, now he has no wine left. So he feels that he's owed money by these people who are negligent in dropping his barrels of precious wine. So he takes their cloaks, takes their garments, some type of whatever it was, their coat that they had, as payment. Now, these two guys, they were quite upset with what happened. They felt that they got the raw end of the deal. So they go to Rav, they go to the famous Rav, and they tell him the story. So Rav calls Rabba Bar Chanan into his bezdin or into his office, whatever it is, and says, give them back their coats. He says, why? They were supposed to do a job for me. Not only did they not do the job, but they made me have a monetary loss. They broke all my barrels of wine. I have nothing now. He says, they were negligent. He says, so Rabbi Hanan asks Rav, Dina Hachi, is this the halacha that I should give them back their clothing, their garments? Amar Lei, so Rav responds to Rabbi Bar Hanan, yes. How do I know it? He quotes a pasuk in Mishle. He quotes the Chachma of Shlomo HaMelech in Perek Beis. Perek Beis, almost there?
I don't know.
Hopefully you get there soon. In Perek Beis, Shlomo HaMelech says, Leman telech b'derech tovim. A person should go on the nice, good path. And then Rav pulls out the next step on him. Tells Rav to Rabbi Bar Hanan, not only should he give them back their coats, because now these guys complain that they have no parnasa, they have no money, they're destitute. So Rav turns to Rabbi Bar Hanan and tells him, pay them for their time, for the job that they were supposed to do for you. He says, what? What type of business is this? First, I hire them. They break my wine. I take their stuff for collateral. You tell me I have to give it back to them. And now I have to suffer a loss and actually pay them for their time, the work that they didn't do for me and actually broke my stuff? Again, Rav responds, yes, this is the halacha, because the pasuk concludes in Mishlei, the same pasuk, V'archos tzadikim tishmar, on the way of the righteous you should guard, you should watch. End of the Gemara. So here we have a whole new level of mshuras hadin. Rabbi Bar Hanan hires porters for the job. Not only do they mess up and break his merchandise, he cannot get any payment back from them for the job that they broke. He has to give them back the stuff he took from them, the garments, and he has to go ahead and pay them for their wages for the job they should have done. And the source for this is a pasuk in Mishlei. Now, the Gemara here never uses the term lfnim mshuras hadin. This was above the letter of the law. But Rashi, in explaining the Gemara over here, if you look on the side, in source 4, Rashi explains this is a halacha in lfnim mshuras hadin. But what's more interesting is that although this fits into the category, general idea of lfnim mshuras hadin, we already have a scriptural source. We have a pasuk in the Torah which the Gemara used twice, once in Baba Metzia, once in Baba Kama, to teach us this halacha. But Rav, for some reason, doesn't use that as his source. Rav goes ahead and quotes a pasuk in Mishlei. And the question, of course, is why? What was wrong with the pasuk in Yisro? Why did we have to go to Mishlei? And why was the first Gemara we quoted totally just didn't have a pasuk at all? Just said it, the Svara just gave logical by Shavas Aveda, you should give it back because lfnim mshuras hadin. It's a pashut halacha. So we have 4 Gemaras, but we see basically 3 ideas. Sometimes the lfnim mshuras hadin is a Svara. Sometimes the lfnim mshuras hadin is learned out from a pasuk in the Torah. And sometimes the concept of the lfnim mshuras hadin is learned out from a pasuk in Mishlei. Okay, let's put that on hold for a minute. Now comes the big question. This halacha that we have spoken about till now, the lfnim mshuras hadin, if you translate the words, Art School translation seems to imply you're going above the letter of the law. Meaning the law tells me I'm absolved. I'm not obligated to do it. We're suggesting that you go above the letter of the law. So it sounds like it should be a suggestive, appropriate halacha, but not necessarily obligatory. But like we said before, the first Gemara used the expression that Rav Yehuda, Shmuel told Rav Yehuda that you're chayiv to give back the item. He didn't say it's a good idea because of lfnim mshuras din. He said you're chayiv. The last Gemara we said from the story of Rabba Bar Hanan who had to pay back the workers. Rav told him, yes, the halach is dina hachi. You should do it because the pasuk in Mishlei. So what is this concept? Is this concept commendable? It's appropriate, which would seem from the simple reading of the words, lfnim mshuras hadin, or perhaps is it obligatory? And of course, this is going to be a machlokes rishonim. So in source number 5 on page 2 on the bottom is the Rush. The Rush is going on the Gemara in Bava Metzia, on the first Gemara we quoted in Eila Metzias. He goes through the whole Gemara, and then where it's underlined is the point we're going to focus on now. After the pasuk says, after the Gemara darshans of the pasuk of Asher Yasun, that a person should go lfnim mshuras hadin, the Rush says where it's underlined v'chayiv lahachzir deka'amar, that which the Gemara said you're obligated to return it. Lav dekafin lei, it doesn't mean you force him. Chayiv doesn't really mean chayiv. We cannot force somebody to act above the letter of the law. So although the word chayiv usually means chayiv, over here the word chayiv is suggestive. We would like for you to return this item. Could we force you to do it? No. Should we tell you to do it? Perhaps we should tell you to do it and we should teach you the halacha, but we cannot hold you to it and expect you necessarily to do it. That's the Rush's opinion. On the next page, in source number 6, we have the Mordechai. The Mordechai is a Rishon as well. And the Mordechai is going to argue with the Rush. He's also going on the Gemara over there in Bava Metzia. And he says, basically we can start from where it's underlined, he says, V'kivan de chazinan. Since we see Davi Kaifilu, that the Chachamim would force one another to keep this halacha, Kid'isa Saif Parak Umnin, like the Gemara, which was source number 4, at the end of Parak Umnin, seeing that Rav forced Rabba Bar Hanan, told him, this is the halacha, this is what you have to do. Gam Anan, so to us, the Mordechai says, Kaifina on the Meva lfnim mshuras hadin, we will force somebody to go lfnim mshuras hadin, im hayecholes biyadai la'asais, if the person is capable. The star there takes you to the side, which is the Haggais Mordechai, and there it says, what does it mean? You're capable? Shu Ashir. So if it has the monetary ability to pay back somebody, even in a case where he's absolved, says the Mordechai, we would force you to go ahead and pay back that person. So, not all men are created equal. According to the Mordechai, if you're a person of means, even if you're technically absolved, Beis Din will say, well, let's get an accounting, let's call your accountant in, let's see where you're holding in your checks and balances. If you're capable of paying that person back, Beis Din, according to Mordechai, will force you to pay back. The Mordechai continues bringing the Gemara, and at the end, with the second underline, the Mordechai he says he supports himself with other Rishonim, v'chein pasak haravan v'avya, which is the Ravya, to kafilalu, we will force lasas lfnim mshuras hadin. So the Mordechai says we force somebody to do lfnim mshuras hadin. He brings a source to prove himself from the Gemara, which we saw by Rabba Bar Hanan, where Rav forced him and told him this is the halacha to pay back, even though technically, again, the porters in that case, they broke his merchandise, he had a loss. So not only did he lose his wine, he also lost his cash because he had to pay back the porters. So here we have now modified machlokes rishonim again, if we could go ahead and force somebody, which is the Mordechai's opinion, and other rishonim, and the Rush's opinion, which seems to go like the simple reading of the words, that lfnim mshuras hadin is only suggestive, it's only commendable, but Beis Din will never force somebody to do that. And the next source, in source number 7, Tosfos, which is in Bava Metzia, on the first Gemara we saw, from source number 1, that's where this Tosfos is located. Tosfos is bothered by this point we brought up before. Why is it, asks Tosfos, that we find various halachos throughout the Gemaras of lfnim mshuras hadin, and again, sometimes there is no scriptural source, sometimes there is a pasuk in the Torah, and sometimes there is a pasuk in Mishlei that uses that's the source to go on the right path. Why is it? Why can't we all come to the agreement of where the source of lfnim mshuras hadin is? Either it's logical, or it's based on a pasuk, and if there's a source in the Torah, why would we jump to Mishlei? Seemingly the Torah source should be a better source. So Tosfos lays down a yesod. Tosfos says an idea which basically splits up lfnim mshuras hadin into 3 categories. Category number one, Tosfos says, is that wherever the Gemara brings the pasuk, I'm just going to paraphrase most of Tosfos' words here. Wherever the Gemara brings the pasuk of Asher Ya'asun, which is the pasuk in the Torah and Parshas Yisro, that's going to tell a person that in cases where some people are chayiv and some people are pater, there is an idea of lfnim mshuras hadin, and you should go ahead and do it. For example, the case of Hashavas Aveda. You have a case where you find something. Let's do this case. You have a zaken ve'ena lefi kvodo. No, I'm sorry. Let's change the case. You have the case of let's use the case. The second case, the third case we saw. I'm sorry. The case of Reb Chia who saw the money. Right? Again, the woman brought him a coin, and he evaluated it. He said it was a good coin, and ended up being a not good currency. So the Gemara said Rav Chia should pay back because lfnim mshuras hadin. Says Tosfos, and the Gemara there quote the pasuk on Parshas Yisro Asher Ya'asu. Says Tosfos, why did the Gemara there bring the pasuk? Because some people would have been obligated me'ikar dedina, according to the basic letter of the law, to pay back, meaning an amateur who would have seen that coin and he would have offered his 2 cents opinion, which wasn't even worth 2 cents because the coin was counterfeit. Since he's obligated to pay, so just because you're the expert, don't use that to your advantage to make yourself now be absolved from payment. So Tosfos says again, where there's a case where there's one category of people that would have been obligated, but you happen to be from that elite group who happen to have this rabbinic license or this license because you're an expert, you can get out, you can be above the law. Says the Gemara, that's concept number one of lfnim mshuras hadin. You shouldn't put yourself in an elite category. If you could afford to pay, you should pay for it, and that's scriptural based in the Torah from the pasuk in Yisro of Asher Ya'asun. You should go ahead and do that. It's commendable to do that. Second category, says Tosfos, is the Gemara which we had Shmuel's father return the lost item after 12 months. Meaning it was found after it was sitting around, totally left abandoned for 12 months. He went ahead and returned it. So there, no one is obligated to return it. Anybody who would have found it, whether the most simpleton, or the biggest Talmid Chacham, or the president, or the king, doesn't make a difference who you are, no one would be obligated to return that item. Everyone would have been allowed to keep it because the owner for sure gave up hope. Nonetheless, you figured you want to be a good Jew, go ahead and return it. There's no loss coming out of your pocket. There's no money coming out of your pocket. You found something. It wasn't yours to begin with. If someone goes ahead and gives you a siman, or you see the name on it, it says Goldberg, if found, please call. So you go ahead, you make a phone call, you give it back to the guy, the guy's happy. That's a mitzvah of lfnim mshuras hadin, but that's totally svara based. That's totally logical. We don't need a pasuk to tell me that you should even go ahead and do that. That's logical, good Samaritan type of law, where we don't have to prove that from the Torah that that's a good idea to do it. It makes sense. There's no monetary loss involved. You found something, there's a way to give it back to the person who lost it. It's appropriate to give it back. You don't need a pasuk for it. The first category we said where the Torah specifically gave me a reason to be absolved. I'm from an elite group. I don't have to give this back, but nonetheless, I would like to give it back because there are categories of people who give it back. So then the Torah says, even though you're absolved and you're from that category, I'm allowed to put myself into the other category and go lfnim mshuras. So then that's based on a pasuk. But again, the second category is everybody's pater. The whole world would have been pater. You want to go ahead and be a good guy? You can be a good guy. That's no problem. Lfnim mshuras hadin, that's logical. The third example, says Tosfos, a third category, which is the last Gemara we saw, which was the case of Rabba Bar Hanan. That is extreme. There, he went lfnim mshuras hadin to the max. Why? Because again, his merchandise was broken. He had a monetary loss, step one. And then Rav told, not only do you have to take that loss, you have to now go ahead and have another loss. Go ahead and pay the people their wages that for the hours they worked for you. That is way beyond even the concept of lfnim mshuras hadin based strictly on the Torah law. That's Shlomo HaMelech's chachma, that you should go ahead and keep that. The pasuk said, the expression of the pasuk was, V'archos tzadikim tishma, you should keep the ways of the righteous. And the beginning of that pasuk was the mantelech b'derech tovim. That we need a pasuk in Mishlei to tell me that you should go ahead and go way beyond the letter of the law to the extreme where I should even suffer a loss and just to keep the peace and to keep good relationships between people. That I wouldn't even be able to obligate somebody from Torah law. That only could come along, and Shlomo HaMelech could tell us that that's commendable because of the Archai Sadikim Tishma. But now, so what we've done now is we've broken up into Tosos. We've categorically described three categories of lfnim mshuras hadin. Tosos did not weigh in on this machlokes rishonim we said previously regarding if you can force or is it only commendable to go ahead and do lfnim mshuras hadin. If it would have been left to my devices, I would have suggested that perhaps Tosos would agree in certain cases you could force, and maybe in certain cases you can't, because Tosos has all these beautiful different categories. But Tosos doesn't give us any inkling of an idea of if you would buy into that idea of if it's obligatory or not. Tosos seems to be learning that the whole thing is commendable, and there's different levels in commendability. I'm not sure if that's a word, but we can coin it now. Sounds right. Okay, thank you. The haskama. Okay, so now I got the patent pending on it from my lawyer that we can go ahead with it. The idea is, though, Tosos is categorical, again, putting these cases into categories, and now we can say, perhaps Tosos would say that, there's different levels of how commendable you would be. And if you would go ahead and go to the extreme, like Rabbi Bar Hanan, that would be extremely commendable, and we would, maybe give you on you at the next dinner and give you a big plaque. The middle level is appropriate, but it's not as great. And the basic levels, we kind of expect almost of everybody to do it. You don't even need a pasuk to tell me. That's kind of almost common sense that would be appropriate to do it.
So what if you find a case of wine, 12 bottles?
Yeah.
You got it for like a year, you don't know who it belongs to, and you take a bottle of wine out and you drink it, really good wine. And then you find at the bottom of the case, it says, if lost, call Shmuley. And you call them up and you say, I got your case of wine.
It's now empty.
It's not necessarily.
Well, it could be empty.
One bottle was broken.
What?
One bottle was broken.
Well, let's say you're more honest than that. You say there are 11 bottles left. I drank a bottle.
Okay, that's a
So are you obligated to give him back the 11 bottles? You're obligated to give him back 12 bottles? The 12th bottle being of the same category as the other bottles? Are you obligated to give him back his 12 bottles? And it doesn't matter what that 12th bottle is. It should be empty 2020.
Okay, so I would say like this. Depending when you found it, meaning let's say you found out that box of wine, a year ago. And that guy lost it, let's say, that day. And he was hoping to recoup his loss over the next couple of weeks and trying to find that he put up signs all over the neighborhood, lost a bottle, lost a barrel of wine, whatever, lost a case of wine, right? And you, too busy on your phone to read the bulletin board in the shul nowadays, or busy with other stuff, and finally a year later you remember, wow, I had that case of wine, and for sure the guy gave up on it already. By now, I'll go ahead and drink it. That's a problem, because there perhaps, okay, I'm overgeneralizing, because you got the case of wine before the owner gave up hope on it, so you had an obligation to return it. As opposed to, let's change the case slightly, where you found a case of old dusty wine that was sitting in some back alley somewhere and looks like it's been there for 10 years, but somehow it's still good. That's going to be different, because then the owner already gave up hope on it for sure, and you're for sure allowed to keep it. There still might be lfnim mshuras hadin, like we're saying now. It's commendable to maybe go ahead and call the guy and tell him that, I have 11 of your good bottles of wine still left, but obligatory, you're definitely not obligated to do that at that point. Again, lfnim mshuras hadin.
Does it make it chiluk the fact that he wrote? Does that show that he was never miyayim?
No, because he put the simon on, but after, the case where I changed his case and said you found it in an old dusty back alley somewhere, so even the guy who has a simon on it has given up on it. Because, after a certain amount of time, to question the poskim exactly how long, let's just assume a year for now, and if someone lost something for a year, he usually assumes that he's never going to get it again. Unless he all of a sudden starts giving money to Kupat a year, Meir Baal Nets and all the various schools, then he might hope that he'll get it back, but I don't know how to deal with that exactly in halacha. Yeah. Okay, we'll get back. Let's move on so we can cover. Let's try to finish other sources. So now, la halacha, how do we pass it? So on the next page, on page Dal, we'll go to source number 8. We'll try to move a little quickly now so we can try to cover as much as we can. The Beis Yosef quotes this machlokes rishonim we quoted before, whether or not we can force a person to not, or if we can force a person or not to fulfill the din of lfnim mshuras hadin. He quotes Rabbeinu Yerucham, who paskins like the Rush, and he says it's pasha to the Beis Yosef that lfnim mshuras hadin is only commendable. We cannot force somebody. He then goes ahead and quotes that Mordechai, which we saw that Bezdin can force, and Beis Yosef rejects it and says, I don't like his rayas. He has no proof, and it's pasha. The Beis Yosef says that we would not force anybody to go to lfnim mshuras hadin. It's completely commendable. The Bach over there in Choshen Mishpan, source number 9, argues vehemently on the Beis Yosef. We don't have time to go through all of it, but he writes that where it's underlined in many other places that Bezdin goes ahead and does force. He feels that the proofs that the Mordechai brings from the Gemara are valid. We see Rav told Rabbi Bachanan to do it. We see the first Gemara Shmuel said you're chayiv to give it back, and other examples he brings, and therefore the Bach says that Bezdin does force. So we had a machlekes Rishayim, now we have a machlekes Achrayim, and it continues forth. The Shulchan Aruch, in source number 10, in Hilchos of Hashavas Aveda, says at the end of that halacha, it's appropriate to go lfnim mshuras hadin and to give a lost item back if there's a siman, which is similar to Leslie's case. It's appropriate to do what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Ramah says, however, if you're an ani, if the finder of the wine in that case was poor and the person who lost it was rich, then the Ramah says there's no idea, there's no inyan, there's no concept of lfnim mshuras hadin. That's based on the Mordechai we saw before, that we only say lfnim mshuras hadin if the person is an usher, if he's of means. But if I find something and I'm poor, and now this is going to be a great benefit for me, and the person who lost it doesn't even really care about it, for him $100 was nothing, so then there's no even lfnim mshuras hadin, the Ramah says, to give it back, because for me, I'm allowed to keep it, and I need it, I use it. The person who lost it doesn't need it. Again, obviously we're talking about where he gave up hope on it, etc. I'm allowed to keep it, and there's no lfnim mshuras hadin according to the Ramah. The Shach over here, which is the end of source 10, when the Machaber said, you're not obligated to give it back, but it's a good idea to go lfnim mshuras hadin, he quickly gives a short reference to this machlokes Rishayim, and it seems to be, from the way the Shach lines it up, a careful reading of the words of the Shach, that he seems to go like the Bach, that a Bezdin would force to go lfnim mshuras hadin. So again, just to quickly sum up this page, we took the machlokes Rishayim, if we force or not on lfnim mshuras hadin, and we showed that machlokes continues into the Achrayim. The Bach says you do yes, Beis Yosef says no, the Shulchan Aruch says go lfnim mshuras hadin when you can, Shach says we can even force like the Bach.
But what's the whole logic of
Logic we'll get to in a minute. Hold on, we're lining everyone up.
Okay.
Don't go away.
All right.
The next page, and page Hey, source 11, again is at the Ramah, all the way at the end of the Shulchan Aruch over there at Sif Beis. The Ramah says this machlokes. First, the Ramah says the Ein Bezdin Yacholim. The end of Sif Beis, the Ramah, Bezdin cannot force to go lfnim mshuras hadin, even though they seem to be appropriate. And then the Ramah says V'yesh cholkim. There are those that argue. So the Ramah kind of leaves us hanging. Which way does he decide? Does he go with the first thing he said, that seemingly we cannot force, but he said Lamaisa at the end of the day, he said there are those that argue, meaning he's giving credence to the idea that you could force, Bezdin could force to go lfnim mshuras hadin. So the Pischei Tshuva over here, which is the next source of part of 11, which is on the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch, he quotes this machlokes, and he says as follows. He quotes where it's underlined. He has a lot of interesting things here. We're going to just speak out what's underlined for now. He quotes from the Sefer Urim V'Tumim, which is Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz. Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz tries to make shalom. He's going to try to make peace between this whole machlokes. And it's hard to really accept, at least at face value, how everyone could agree to this. But he suggests that really everyone agrees that when we say kaifin, Bezdin never takes out their sticks and their whips and goes ahead and beats someone up until they will go ahead and pay back the lfnim mshuras hadin. Everyone agrees to that. When we say kaifin or ain't kaifin, whether or not Bezdin forces or not, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz v'ayim betumim, the hach kfiyah, this forcing, hainu b'dvarim, is Bezdin coerces him with words. You are obligated to do this. And Bezdin tells the guy, if you don't listen to us, ata avaryon, you are considered a transgressor. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, everyone agrees, the ain't kofim b'shutim, we do not hit the person with sticks. And he goes on, we do not force physically. Force here means Bezdin speaks to the guy, sweet talks the guy, or maybe harsh talks the guy into doing what's appropriate, and they tell him you're obligated, but they will not go ahead and actually forcefully, physically take the money from the guy, although Bezdin at times could do that. Bezdin is allowed to go ahead and be yored. If Bezdin feels someone is obligated, they're allowed to go down actually and extract money. But in this case, says Bezdin won't do that physically. Rather, they'll convince a person, and you can imagine if you're in a court case in a bezdin and you have 3 or more chashuv rabbanim looking down on you and telling you, you should really pay. We suggest you really pay. You got to have a lot of chutzpah and gall to walk out of there and say, I'm not going to pay. It's true, Bezin might not send out the police force, but it's very commendable and very suggested that you pay, because you'll be a good Jew and you'll get Olam Haba for it. However they're going to do it, however they're going to convince the person with words, that's how Rabbeinu Snipes paskins. And the Aruch HaShulchan, although he doesn't quote Rabbeinu Snipes, I didn't put it down in the papers here, the Aruch HaShulchan Achosh Mishpat as well paskins like this tumim, paskins in the same way, that Bezin will convince a person with words that they will tell him it's appropriate to act lfnim mshuras hadin. Now, before we move on, I just want to speak out. What's fascinating to me is that these poskim, none of them mention the different categories of Tosfos. Because perhaps one could argue and say, even this whole discussion of forcing in lfnim mshuras hadin, or forcing with words in a nicer way of lfnim mshuras hadin, seemingly we should be able to split into categories. Some lfnim mshuras hadin bezins will push more, some they'll push medium, and some they'll push only a little bit. We don't seem to have that distinction within the halacha. It seems to be like we saw before in the Ramah. If a person is able to do it, if he has the monetary means, Bezin will tell him to do it. If he doesn't, the Bezin won't. We don't seem to, the difference of cases is not necessarily important. I'm asking this really as a question, I'm just pointing it out. And I'm saying that the categories of Tosfos, although it was very good to break down the various Gemaras, when it boils down to the halacha, at the end of the day is, if Bezin feels it's appropriate to pay back, and they feel the person is of means, or is of the stature to do it, the person can speak to that as well, then even if he doesn't necessarily, even if he's not the richest guy, but he's an important public figure, he's a chashav rav, or whatever other important politician, whatever it might be, Bezin will convince him as well to go ahead and do it. Now I want to change the question a little bit, and take it out of the category of people per se. Here's the following shaila, and I'll just try to sum it up. It's an interesting case, but other places have similar cases as well. Until now, we've been discussing individuals. Should an individual act lfnim mshuras hadin? Could Bezin force an individual to act lfnim mshuras hadin? Let's say you have an organization, a maisid, a tzedakah organization, a shul, a yeshiva, anything of that nature, and there's a machlokes, there's a dispute. And if it would have been two people having this machlokes, Bezin would have told, the person, you're pater, but you should go ahead and do it lfnim mshuras hadin. That's when it's a one-on-one basis. But here you deal with mammon hektish. It's holy money. It's tzedakah money. Do we suggest, would Bezin suggest even to an organization to go ahead now and act lfnim mshuras hadin? The case of which is on source number 12, I didn't copy the whole case, it's a little complicated. I'll try to sum it up. Basically, you had like this. You had a certain Rav, we'll call him Rav Ruvain, who wrote a sefer. And he was a big tzaddik, he wrote a sefer, it was great to be published, and he dedicated the sefer to be distributed by a certain machon, by a certain institution, by a certain maisid, and they could do with it as they so desire. And this way, they have a certain prestigious institution, they'll help distribute it, they'll get the money, and he doesn't want anything to do with it, you can have all the rights to it, he totally gave it up. Now this maisid, this institution, very much appreciated it, but they didn't have the time to be busy with it, so they put their name on it. They stamped it up, so to speak. That we're distributing it, we're suggesting it. This is a great sefer, but they sort of gave over all the rights to a third party. We'll call him Reb Shimon. And Reb Shimon was the one who really did all the graphic designing, the page layout. He did the index to it. He really put a lot of work into it. And this sefer was published 3 times within the lifetime of the original author. Again, Reuven was the one who wrote the sefer, but he gave it all up. He was the tzaddik, gave it all up to this institution, and the institution kind of really all gave it over to a third person. And this third person invested a lot of his own time, and he was the one, through the 3 printings, who always got all the royalties of this sefer in the lifetime of the author. Now the author passed away, Reb Ruvain. The widow of Reb Ruvain, who of course is bereft of her loss and is feeling all types of feelings of pain and anguish, she goes now ahead and publishes her husband's sefer on her own. That sefer, again, which was published 3 times in his lifetime, which was technically owned by the machon, by this meister, by this institution, but was really always done by this third party, Reb Shimon, who always got all the royalties to it. This widow went ahead now on her own and said, listen, it's my husband, it's my sefer, my family, I want to publish it to raise money for my kids, my family, and I want to continue living, I need money. She went ahead and did it on her own accord. Unfortunately, Reb Shimon took it to a din Torah and said, you can't do that. In the lifetime of your husband, I put all the work and effort into the sefer. You went ahead now and just, so to speak, photocopied that sefer, which I put a lot of work into it. Your husband never made a macha against me. He never argued that he wanted the money. He always let me take care of it. You have no right now to go ahead, he tells the widow, and publish that sefer. You have no rights to it. She says, what do you mean? It's my husband's sefer. Machlokes. This Maisa, the institution, the Machon, who technically had the rights, hears about it, and they say, oh boy, now we're in trouble. Because we technically have the rights, they're fighting about it, so they decided what they would like to do is they would like to just break up the Machlokes. They would like to pay off this guy, Reb Shimon, give him $10,000 cash, here's $10,000, take it and leave and go away, let the Amana have her money. That's what they would like to do. The problem is, it's mom and hektish. It's not their own money. It's the institution's money. It's tzedakah money. It belongs to a yeshiva. You can't just go ahead and blow $10,000 to make up, to split up a fight which is not directly related to the yeshiva. They feel achrayus for it because they had this rav who gave them the sefer and a whole story. But are they allowed to do that or not? So it's lfnim mshuras hadin. This tzedakah organization, this yeshiva, I think it was, would like to act lfnim mshuras hadin. But again, it's not their money. It's not coming out of their pocket. It's coming out of their general bank account, which is considered mom and hektish. It's holy money. It's community funds. Is it directly related to this, or you had a question about this?
Yeah.
Okay. So this shaila is dealt with extensively by Asher Weiss Shlita, big paisik in Eretz Yisrael, and to sum it up in his tshuva, when I was running out of time, go through it's a fascinating read. He paskins that a tzibur has a din of an adam chashuv. He brings a reference to Chaim Ozer and Achiezer paskins like that, and therefore he paskins, which is against Rabbi Yashiv's psak. Now Rabbi Yashiv wasn't asked this exact question. Rabbi Yashiv was asked a different question, a different case. In a similar case, Rabbi Yashiv paskin that a tzibur, a meisid cannot go lfnim mshuras din. Rabbi Yashiv felt in this case you could go lfnim mshuras din, and he paskin. It's a great read. I invited everybody to read. I'm sorry we can't go through it, but that even at Tzibur, it has a din of the mshuras hadin. They're allowed to do it. Exactly how much they should pay, he says, I can't tell you. That you have to go to someone to evaluate the case, see exactly how much the sefer is worth. I can't tell you bottom line how much money to pay, but I suggest to go to the mshuras hadin. The next shayla, which is also fascinating, page number 13 on page 8, which is a general shayla. All these cases we just said go in the mshuras hadin. So now, at the end of the day, am I obligated to turn or not? We said it depends if Bezin can force you or not. But okay, let's assume that Bezin will just convince you to do it, right? Like we said from Rabbi Yisrael, Bezin will talk you into it with the words. But now, I find $100 in the street. $100. No simon, nothing, I'm allowed to keep it. I want to be a good Jew. I find out my friend lost $100. It seems like it was his because, he lost it on this and this day. I found that in that day. I found it in the parking lot. He lost it in the parking lot. Everything seems to match up. So I'm going to go ahead and give him back the $100. Two questions now. Me, the finder, am I obligated to be mafresh, to set aside meiser on that money? Because technically the money is mine. I own the $100. So it's like I made $100. I should have to separate tzedakah money, meiser, from that $100. Question number one. Question number two. The person who now got it back, technically, he's not supposed to get it back because he lost it in a public area, on a marketplace, in a parking lot, whatever it is. So the money is gone. He lost it. So now he's like getting a new $100. Does he have to give meiser off that money? Fascinating halachic discussion. Look it up. I just want to end off with the question Rabbi asked before. What's the logic? What's the feeling? What's the spirit of the law behind all this? So this is a good shaila. And really this is dealt with extensively by the Ramban al Torah in two places. But not only is it Ramban al Torah, it's brought la halacha as well in the Magid Mishnah on the side of the Rambam. It's not in the source sheets over here, but the Magid Mishnah at the end of Hilchos Shchenim quotes us la halacha as well. There's a pasuk in the Torah in Parshas V'Eschanan, V'asisa hayashar v'hatoiv. After the Torah goes ahead and lists us many halachos regarding Beidon L'Machavera, various things how we're supposed to act between a fellow man, the Torah ends off by saying a general concept. V'asisa hayashar v'hatoiv. Now what does that mean? Just do good and be straight. That's seemingly open-ended. And says the Ramban, yes, it is open-ended. V'akavana bazeh, the Ramban writes, Ki mitchila omar, first the Torah tells us, Shetishmachu koisa ve'edvaisav asher tzivisicha. First Hashem is commanding us to do Torah, keep everything as is written. Keep the Torah, all 613 as much as we can do for each person. Do all those mitzvahs. V'ata yoymar, but now the Torah is telling us, Gam b'asher lo tzivcha. Even that which we're not commanded it, tein daitecha, we should use our intellect, La'asais hatoiv v'hayashar be'einav, to go good and straight in the eyes of the Almighty. Kihu oihev hatoiv v'hayashar, because Hashem loves the good and the straightness. V'zeh inyan gadol. The Ramban is telling us, and it continues in the beautiful expressions, and again the Magid Mishnah says similar ideas as well. There's really two Shulchan Aruchs. there's the basic halachos in the Torah of what we need to do, and that's immutable. That's for everybody at all times and all places. And then when we're able to, and we're able to use our intellect and our seichel and get down to being what the Torah really wants from us, to develop ourselves to be better people, that's vasisa yasher v'hatoiv. Are you obligated? Is it commendable? It might depend on who you are. If you're a person who's a Baal Madrega, and hopefully we all are, we're aspiring continuously to reach higher and higher. The spirit of the law is, the Torah is telling us, this is what we need to do, the basic, but we have to go to the next step. We have to constantly raise the bar and make sure we are being Asisa V'Yashav HaToiv, as the Pasuk in Mishlei says. We have to go with Archais HaTzadikim Tishmar. That's the level we're aspiring to do. Are we always able to do that? Perhaps not. But at least that's the bar. That's we know where we have to reach. And if we, as the expression is, if you reach for the stars, hopefully you'll get close to it. You might not be able to reach the stars, at least we'll get to it. And I think with this, really, we can explain the Gemara, which we started in the beginning. Well, the second source is that we didn't have time really to speak about it so much. But the Gemara said, Rabbi Yochanan said, Yerushalayim was destroyed because they didn't go to lfnim mshuras hadin. Lfnim mshuras hadin. Is it obligated? Not obligated? This, that? Is it minator? Not minator? Is it logical? There's so many discussions about it. What do you mean didn't go lfnim mshuras hadin? That's why Yerushalayim was destroyed. It sounds like it's lfnim mshuras hadin. Why should Yerushalayim be destroyed for that? But I think with the Ramban and this idea, this concept in Torah Hashkafa, that's why Yerushalayim had to be destroyed, because of this concept. Because it's true, we might have been keeping the basic halacha, but that's not enough from us. That Hashem is demanding from the Amma Nifchar to be a mamleches kohanim, a goy kadosh, that we really have to keep going higher and higher. We can't be sufficient with just the basic levels of Bein Adam L'Chaver. This is specifically in Bein Adam L'Chaver. When it comes to halachas of Bein Adam L'Shamayim, that's a whole different discussion. We're not going to discuss that right now. We're discussing particularly interpersonal relationships where the sky is the limit, literally. And that's a reason, says the Gemara, for Yerushalayim to be destroyed. I think it fits in very well with this Ramban. We should be zeicha to be becoming a Mashiach Tzidkenu, and we should rebuild the Beis HaMikdash still in our days.
Amen. Let's go up. Beautiful.